Thank you for joining today's webinar. We're going to be holding on for just a couple more minutes and waiting for folks to get connected. So thank you for your patience when we will begin in just a couple of minutes and tuning in to a webinar on Don't Let Your Workplace App's First Day Be Its Best Day. Thank you. Okay, well, let's get started. So welcome and thank you for joining today's webinar, Don't Let Your Workplace App's First Day Be Its Best Day, presented by Stuart Elliott, CEO of Modo, the leading digital experience platform for the modern workplace. So just a few housekeeping announcements before we get started. So today's webinar is scheduled for approximately 30 minutes. The presentation will be followed by a brief question and answer session. Please enter any questions that you may have during the presentation in the Q&A console, and we will address as many of them as possible following Stuart's presentation. If time doesn't permit for us to address your specific question, we will certainly follow up with you via email. And we will also be sending you a copy of the recording of today's presentation with the email address that you used during the registration process. Let's see, so just a brief introduction of Stuart. Stuart has been CEO of Modo, leading Modo for the past 8 years in the enterprise market, and today we'll share his perspectives on leading workplace app experiences. So with that, I will turn things over to Stuart. Thanks, Stuart.
Well, thank you, Maura, and welcome to the audience. In addition to what Maura said, this is going to be a short story about being agile. We're going to start off with the trustee value curve, and like any project, whether it's mobile or otherwise, you want to increase value over time, right? And that goes without saying. And typically when you start a project, you're trying to figure out what your endpoint is, what your North Star is, and this is no different with a mobile app. And whether your timeline is aspirational, in the famous words of Elon Musk, or is something that you are striving to get done as quickly as possible, you should have a strategy, of course, to get that in place and have the right platform to achieve those objectives. But often, especially when it comes to mobile, there's a strong desire to research and design everything that you might think is important going into version 1. This is especially difficult with a mobile app experience platform, because most of the people you're working with at your workplace have used hundreds, if not thousands, of apps by this point in time. And they all have opinions. They've all seen it all, right? And they want to share it or see it inside the workplace app. And so that creates its own set of challenges, especially as the research project or research phase goes on. And the longer it goes, you can see some tongue-in-cheek benefits. You know, it's of course not fun trying to make everybody happy, but it does actually present an opportunity when you have something like this. In fact, all these dubious benefits can be opportunities for you to excel and overachieve what people's expectations are. And so, with that, with more time, more opportunity to add features, but if you can do that incrementally, as we'll show later, that can in fact help out the progress of the project and ultimately the success. Your sponsor, who over time will regularly, as you've seen in your own experiences, ask you for updates to actually show something, it's nice when in fact you can do that immediately. And for those of you who are actually sponsors, it's nice to get that type of feedback to see what's going on in real time, incrementally. If time is not an essence, then that's not a problem. But typically time is a big challenge, especially again with a mobile app where there's so much that can be done, especially with all the different experiences as we just shared. What'll happen though is if it's not done on a timely basis, you may find other departments will start to build their own apps. And that leads to app proliferation. We see it all the time, and we'll share some experiences on that. Again, an opportunity. How do you not only get ahead of that, but allow those departments who are pushing to have additional app experiences be able to participate in your project so they achieve their objectives while meeting the ultimate goal of a digital experience application for your modern workplace. This goes along with your expectations, right? What are the expectations and patience curves of the sponsor? You'll see that the expectation curves are, in general, identical to the value curve. And in turn, unfortunately, in the other direction is your patience curve. The longer things go out, of course, patience declines. It starts to diverge, in fact, from expectations, and that can create its own set of difficulties. The opportunity, though, if you do it a different way, take a different approach, you can not only meet the needs of the expectations, but also meet the challenges of patience, which can get in the way, of course, of the value curve if it becomes an issue for whoever's sponsoring the project. So with that, there is another approach, and I run and encounter this all the time. There's a lot of pressure these days to be agile, and unfortunately, it's getting used so often it's become a bit of a buzzword. Modo actually has been agile since its inception. We run the entire business on Scrums. We have done that since our MIT days, in fact, 10 years ago. And so incremental improvement is in the DNA of the company. And in fact, our product is designed for incremental improvement by whoever is using it. And so that gives you this opportunity to address some of those benefits that we chatted about earlier. And but keep in mind, Agile is not a waterfall broken up by sprints. No, indeed, Agile is something about immediately delivering increased value at any point of the value curve. How do you achieve that? And that's something that we'll explore some more during the course of this presentation. So going back to your value curve and thinking about it in terms of agility, what are you doing all along the line to meet the needs of the workplace, of course, the people that you're originally building this app for, but also the sponsors? And indeed, taking it a step further, what is the digital experience agility curve? If you think about the phases of an app, and I laid out 4 here, these are general phases that get you to that ultimate objective that we explored in the very first slide. And we'll look at each one of these and how you get to that endpoint so you can be successful and do it on a timely basis, because what we're sharing here in terms of agility is not just a whole lot of extra work to do incremental improvement, but ultimately to get you to that objective as quickly as possible. In fact, far faster than you would have otherwise by trying to design and research everything in advance. So if you look at these phases, which by the way have their own incremental phases, because agility is about improving during no matter where you are. So whether you're in the generalized phase or the authenticated phase, you should be able to incrementally improve. And with that, that goes to the theme of today's presentation. Your workplace app's first day will be a great day, but it shouldn't be the best day. we think about Generalize, and Generalize is not about just having a bunch of information that's on your website. In the context of a digital experience app, it should be about targeted generalized information, information that I need as an employee today to be successful, where I am and who I am. And that's part of that is rich content that is relevant, but it's also about navigation. And navigation is not getting from one building to another or one conference room to another, although that's part of it. It's also getting to work. It's also about commuting. It's also about parking. All those things that you would expect in a workplace app. How do you provide all that? Then, how do I get your attention? I need to communicate with you to bring you into the app. And I definitely need to make sure that this thing looks as good as possible. In fact, it should not only meet the theming and guiding and branding guidelines of your workplace, it should exceed them. How do you make a beautiful app as part of this process? And Engage, it's two-way, right? It's not only about getting your attention with the communications and bringing you into a beautiful app, but it's allowing you to interact with the company as an employee. That could be social media, but it also can be all the events that are happening on campus. How do you let people know about those? Dining, well, we all got to eat, right? So what's in the cafeteria? What's also in my surroundings? What are the dining options that the company gives me? What about my nutritional needs? All those things can be part of this, and we'll share some more about that in just a minute. Of course, there's room reservations. Nice thing about room reservations is it brings your workplace employees into the app on a daily basis. And the next one goes into the heart of the research that we talked about earlier. It's not as important to do research before an app is designed, because that can lead you to a lot of paths that you don't yet know about. In fact, what you think might be important today before you build the app will likely be very different than what you think a year from now, or maybe even 3 months from now. But if you start with an app at the get-go and start getting feedback and analytics going, you'll get real-time information that can inform you on how to build the next phase. So with that in mind, I just showed you a couple of slides that had maybe a dozen different entries. The reality is there are dozens. And having those off the shelf allow you to have building blocks to explore all the different ways to enhance the app on a real-time basis. So you look at all these modules which are off the shelf in the Modo experience. You as a non-developer can use these as building blocks to build whatever type of experience wherever you happen to need it. So what's available in Chicago will be different from what's in Miami or New York or San Francisco. And whoever's in those particular areas should be able to create those experiences locally using these off-the-shelf modules, but in the context of that local area. And bringing it together in a non-developer system so that a domain expert, whoever's local, whoever happens to know something about the information that you're putting together, can take all those modules and build a gorgeous app and in real time deploy it. Now, when I say deploy, that's in air quotes, right? Because you may in fact just have it with an audience that's in a pre-release audience to explore the app, to give feedback and to incrementally improve it before it goes into full-blown production. But at least it's a real app. And notice that you can explore not only native apps for Android and iPhone, but then also deploy on the desktop because it delivers an HTML5 channel, which also can be used on kiosks or those large screen displays that you see when you exit an elevator. In real time, you produce it once as a non-developer, and the platform will take you the rest of the way. So now you're getting a multi-channel experience to really explore all the different things that a workplace may have or need or require, getting real-time feedback. I mentioned communicate. Well, you're not going to know much about the app unless I can get your attention, right? And as a non-developer, you can go out and send in, communications to your entire company, to a location, to a building, to a certain class of employee, to an individual, and allow them to opt in or opt out a certain channel so that they can explore all the different things and make sure that they can get the information they want when they want it, but the type of information that they want when they want it. So I go up the agility curve, and I've now informed you of all the different types of things that are important for your day. I've communicated with you and allowed you to communicate back. You've explored all the different things that are going on campus. And because of the nature of this, you are now bringing in the stakeholders who can participate in not only the design, but the creation of the app. So all the people who may have their own opinions can actually express those opinions directly inside of our system and do this in a matter of weeks. Now, you can take longer than that, of course. It's up to you. But the idea is that you can do it quickly and incrementally and provide value, and then figure out what people are using and what they're not and what they'd like to see. And that type of feedback and that type of survey information is real and actionable and can be used to improve the next phases. So thinking about the next phases, well, you can look at inform and engage as part of generalize and authenticate. I know who you are at the authenticate stage because by definition, you've logged in. I now know your role. I now know some attributes about you. But with empower, I'm going to take it to the next phase. I'm not just going to give you localized information that's about who your role is. I'm actually going to give you actionable information that is data specific to you. It might be your paycheck information. It could be your HR information. It could be other types of data which is specific to you as an employee that's important to you. So for example, I may need to get your attention because you need to go see your advisor inside the company, or your HR personnel, or your boss, or your boss's boss, or whoever the case may be. But then, as part of that, give you the actionable information, data that's important to those types of communications. Now, you can look at the rest of it. We talked about kiosk and desktop. Those multi-channel engagements are super important, right? But there's also, we talked about earlier, navigation, taking it a step further, indoor navigation, and then, of course, multi-site. We'll talk some more about that in just a bit. Then we get to that next stage, truly taking the app to the next level. I would say the vast majority of the apps want to get to the empower stage. At Modo, we strive for the next one. How do you get an employee to do more? So what does this all mean? Well, we'll talk about that in just a moment. And in fact, if we look at our apps and what you can do with them, how do I get you to understand how you're doing as an employee? One. Two, how do I encourage you to do more, right? Our founder and CTO, Andrew Yu, calls this the mobile Fitbit. I can now not only give you actionable data to help you inform your day and do better, but I can also encourage you by showing you in charts and graphs and other types of meters to how you're doing as an employee. How are you doing toward your goals? How are you doing compared to other employees or other departments, or the objectives of whatever project you may be working on, including your mobile one. So you think about that, you end up with a mobile dashboard. And that dashboard can include all those components you saw earlier on the screen full of modules that we have off the shelf, in combination with specific ones that have actionable data that's specific to you as an employee. And you can see some of those things here. Sure, an agenda, that's a simple thing, but what about my goals? As I mentioned a moment ago, or my day, what do I need to get done today? Or how do I reserve things that are available? And much more. So that's one aspect. I've gotten information to make myself more productive. I've encouraged my employees as the project owner to do more. But now how do I get those employees to actually engage in the creation of the app? Now, we conduct here what we call ideathons. Ideathons you can think of as hackathons for non-developers. So we'll actually do these at universities. Hundreds of students will participate. We will train them in an hour's time on Saturday morning, and by Sunday, they've created these amazing applications, right? Think about it. Think about how you can actually crowdsource using your own teams. Now, that may just be the stakeholders into the app, but they could also be other types of employees that you hadn't considered bringing into the app. Let's explore those ideas. And in fact, we do that with employees. We'll bring together different departments. It could be somebody from marketing, somebody from accounting, somebody from sales, somebody from engineering, somebody from services, and put them in a room and design extensions to the app. Some of these people are completely non-technical, but we get some of the most amazing ideas from the most unexpected sources. So you end up taking discussions that you might do as part of an app brainstorming session and turn it into actionable content, actionable capabilities. You take the intangible and turn it into tangible. You take the hypothetical and turn it into real capability. And with that, you can not only do it in a way to explore and crowdsource capabilities, but do it globally. Most of the customers we work with in the enterprise space are either national and in many cases global. And as you can see here, we can in fact expand globally. So you may see 5 different apps here. This is in fact the same app showing itself in 5 different ways around the globe. In fact, there could be 100 or 200 different ways or 1,000. And going back to the Ideathon concept, you could encourage the participation of others around the world to actually work on the app and make sure that it does the right thing for that local geography. Sounds too good to be true, right? But the product has been designed from the get-go to enable this. And it's the very thing that allows the richness in the application. Because you can see here, you can have so many different applications in so many different ways. And we got about 10 here, it could be 100. And that's what you would expect as a global enterprise, is how is your app impacted all the different operations of the company in the most meaningful way possible, leveraging domain experts, not technical experts. You may say, well, how do you do that, right? Well, our app admin, which is the culmination of a decade of work, of campus work, of workplace work, all the different experiences that we've encountered have led to hundreds and hundreds of features in our admin, which we like to think they're all easy to use. But we've also learned, and we're no longer naive enough to believe that a person who is using it 5 minutes a week can remember how to use those hundreds of features. So you as a central admin, the project owner, the sponsor, when you delegate rights to somebody, if you delegate 10 rights or 5 rights or 3 rights, when they log in, those are the only 3 rights they're going to see. The rest of it disappears. It doesn't gray out, it disappears. And even if you're working on something for 5 minutes a week, you can remember how to do 3 things. This leads to the type of scaling that you really need to see in an application like this. Everything we do is enterprise grade. So although we make it super easy to delegate, whether it's communications or functionality or whatever the case may be, everything is still centrally approved. So I can delegate rights, but still maintain governance and company standards. Whether it's functionality, whether it's communications, whether it's theming and branding or how it looks, all that can be controlled. And I also need to know how it works. And so with a dashboard, I can see exactly what's working, what's not, what's trending, what people are asking for. So instead of just pre-app surveys, I can do in-app statistical analysis, in-app analysis of what our employees are looking for, and then furthermore, providing real-time feedback from them to see what else should be in the app. And that gets us to that final stage of elevate. And there's no real final stage, right? You may look at this as aspirational to begin with, but in fact, you can go above aspirations to something more. And that's what we strive to do. Keep in mind, because of the incremental and agile nature of this platform, everything can be created or deleted at will. So when you actually go to your own internal market, whatever the market may happen to be, a department or an individual or a group, value can be created and value can be removed and replaced. So if you don't like the look and feel, if you don't like the functionality, it can in fact be updated in real time. So as I mentioned earlier, these discussions no longer become just discussions on a whiteboard, but rather become feature improvement on the fly dynamically and testing it dynamically in real time to see how well it works. So if you think about the choices, yes, there are choices. You can go back to the original one where you can go and have a custom app, right? And this is the common approach, right? The problem with a custom app is, by its nature, it's not agile. You have to design everything up front in order to contain costs. But even with that, your value is chasing your costs. It's a really awful situation, right? Having value chase costs means that the sponsor is unhappy because they think they should get more along the lines of what their expectations were, while the person who's actually implementing it is having a hard time doing more without additional resources or funding. Nobody's happy. There are point solutions which are quite good, and those point solutions will get you to an endpoint that will achieve that objective. The problem with point solutions is they have a natural solution limit. And like a lot of point solutions, they end up on, frankly, screen 10 of your employee's app. And we all know what happens with screen 10, right? Those are the apps that are forgotten about. Those are the apps that are generally discarded. And the nice thing about a product like ours is that, in fact, you can leverage even those apps on screen number 10 and incorporate them as part of a seamless experience with all these application assets or mobile application assets you might have on site. The problem also with point solutions is it leads to app proliferation. It's just too much noise, and it's the very thing that will push away your employees. So how do you incorporate it all in a nice seamless experience? And that leads to what we would call our Modo digital workplace platform. And of course, I'm terribly biased and like to think that we will solve all these problems for you. And we are very motivated and encouraged by what our customers are doing on a daily basis to prove this agile capability, which leads to compounded value creation, right? You're now taking the advantages of the platform, which has all these things built in, but you're also leveraging the domain expertise of employees across your entire enterprise. And if you look at them in comparison to each other, value creation versus cost, and how those look lined up. Thank you very much for your time. I will now open the floor to questions.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. It looks like we do have a few questions. The first of which is, what is the typical time to implement for a workplace app?
Yeah, and this is going back to one of the earlier slides, it is possible to create, and in fact, for a net new customer, we'll create a working app within a matter of hours, and it'll have some core functionality. Now, realistically, something that you want to put in the hands of your employee testers, that can take a matter of weeks to get there. And it's not a challenge of keyboard time, it's really a challenge of, hey, what do you want to prioritize in that first release? The good news is because you have all those off-the-shelf components that I shared during the course of the presentation, those building blocks can be put in place quickly and get that feedback. So weeks to get to an initial release, but there are some that will take longer and go 2 months because they really want to have a wider audience, or potentially the initial testing group is in the thousands. And so they want to go through a few more exploratory moves before even putting in place those building blocks.
Okay, next question is, are analytics capabilities available for all modules?
Yeah, we will tell you exactly which modules are succeeding in the app, which are being used. Often you may find that modules that you've created or that we've created as part of that building block list aren't being used just because the employees don't know about them, right? So that's either a matter of exposing it in a better way inside the app or getting the attention of employees through communications to bring them into that. So yes, we will tell you exactly what's working and what's not throughout the app, and even more detail than you can imagine, just slicing it down to an even more granular level.
And let's see, John has a question about what is the most significant driver of adoption of a workplace app? Yeah, so in the early phases, you can have the chicken and egg problem, right? Because people just don't simply know about the app. And the most successful apps that we see out there are ones where there is a campaign to get awareness up. And so there are multiple ways to drive that demand. The awareness campaign in itself can be quite valuable, because once they get in there and figure out, hey, I can get some useful stuff done, they'll grab a hold of it, right, and start using it. There is the the carrot and stick approach. So what I described was the carrot approach. Hey, look at all the good things that are in there. The stick approach is you have 1 or 2 features in there that are only available inside the app, and they're forced to download in order to make those things happen. I would say that you want to use that approach lightly, but there are
areas to do just that. And the combination can be powerful and lead to widespread adoption. So that can happen in a matter of weeks, or it can happen longer than that, depending on what your rollout is. I would say many companies, of course, will do a soft rollout as well and let word of mouth take care of itself so that they can slowly grow with the population.
Okay, and the last question here is training required or recommended for non-IT admins?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. But we can train in an hour. We do it in our Ideathons all the time. Now, training can be much more expansive than that. We have dozens of videos, and we also have live training by instructors to take that next step. But yes, of course, we will go ahead and train you to get you up and running. Now, I will say that a developer has additional options inside the system so that you can take any data source, any proprietary system, any whatever website, and take and consume that information for net new modules inside of our product. And that does take an additional layer of training. But for the non-developers, it doesn't take long to get you very, very productive.
Okay, well, thank you, and thanks to everyone on the line who has stayed with us for all this time. And as previously mentioned, we will be sharing the recorded version of this presentation, so you can stay tuned for that. Thank you, and have a great day.